From years of anxiety to warrior and mentor, Bradley Robinson created the Anxiety Project to help you end your anxiety naturally. Let's mold the new you and let's end anxiety together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Anxiety Project podcast. Welcome to episode 344. I'm Brad Robinson, and today I'm talking with Jeremy Lipkowitz. I'm really excited about today's episode because he is a coach that helps men with porn addiction. He himself struggled with it, and he talks about his story and what it takes to overcome this dragon. As you may know, because I talk about this a lot on my channel, I struggled with it for a decade, and now I am going on 7 years clean of pornography. And so we dive into all the nitty gritty, the addiction cycle, and we dive into what would you say the pathway for a man is in regards to making himself more competent in overcoming a part of his psyche that he has no control over and is a slave to. There's lots here, and I highly recommend that you share this with somebody who is struggling with porn addiction. This needs to be shared. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and I hope you enjoy. No longer a Buddhist monk turned coach, and specifically around porn addiction. Now, like I said earlier, I'm really excited to talk to you because I'll give you context to where I'm coming from. And also for my audience who's new to my channel, who doesn't know my backstory with pornography, at a young age, I would say 12 years, struggled with pornography. And I remember the very first time I opened the laptop, I can't remember how old I was. I stopped when I was 27, around there. And I remember the first time there was this voice inside that said, I don't think this is right to do it. And I was like, let's see what Google has to say about it. I Google it. Oh, pornography, masturbation, perfectly healthy for a young man to do. You're not going to get the transmitted diseases, and nothing bad will come of it. And it gave me this green light to indulge in the hedonism. And there was that voice, like that, like I was saying, that was telling me otherwise, that I didn't trust. And then 12 years later, I wound up finding someone on YouTube who was a young guy like me who went 500 days without pornography and masturbation. And I was laughing. Like, I was like, who is this guy? Like, like, come on, there's nothing wrong with that. But I spent so many years and hours subduing that voice. And now it was no longer present, but pornography, masturbation was just the norm. And then that seed of that man talking about going that length of time, it stuck with me. It was so outside of my normal, my comfort zone and what I was used to. And it stuck, it planted its seed, and eventually grew into what for me now is 7 years clean and no masturbation as well with that. So I want to talk to you how you became the man you are now, coaching these men that I'm particularly passionate about myself, going through that experience and struggling with the recovery process. It wasn't a linear, steady thing. It was really a rocky journey. How did you come to be this person from being a Buddhist monk to a coach?
Yeah, well, the Buddhist part, my interest in meditation and Buddhist meditation came long after my interest in breaking free from porn and noticing kind of the ways that that was impacting my life. So, uh, my porn addiction was the start of the whole journey when I started to notice some of the ways that it was impacting my life, impacting my relationships, my expectations of the partners I was having, my ability to take joy and pleasure in simple things. I just started to notice a lot of the little tendrils of this habit reaching into my life and causing harm, causing damage. And so that got me interested in looking at this habit and breaking free from it. And I can talk more about what the turning point was for me. There were some very pivotal moments in my life where I had these turning points, these insights into the behavior. But to make a long story short, I did start to notice that it was impacting my life and looked at what was the root cause of this. I started to look more at the deeper issue, not just porn as one symptom, but what was the deeper issue going on? Why was I reaching out for porn in the first place? And that led me to Buddhist meditation and some of these deeper questions on happiness and inner strength and personal development.
How did what did you discover when that you said the underlying factors? What did you discover was
To reach out to that kind of drug and behavior? Yeah. So for me, I started to notice I had these moments when I was in college because I started watching porn at a very early age, maybe 7, 8, 9 years old. It started off not as hardcore internet porn because back then we didn't really have that, but it started off with the lingerie catalog that would come in the mailbox. And I would look at that and say, oh, this makes me feel good. When I look at these pictures, I feel something in my body and I like the way that feels. And when I touch myself, oh, that feels good too. And comic book characters, just certain things that were not porn, but they were sexual material that I started to notice that it made me feel a certain way and I could control that by looking at it. And it slowly over time grew in a natural way. It got into pornography. At that time, it was VHS tapes and some magazines. And then we got internet, and it slowly started to grow. You slowly started to be able to download photos. You started to be able to search for terms that you were interested in. By the time I got to college, that's when these tube sites were coming out, and you could start to have an almost infinite variety, even back then. Even 20 years ago, whenever this was for me, you could start to have whatever you wanted in an almost infinite variety, and there could be no end to it if you wanted. You could just keep searching for more exciting, more novel, whatever you wanted. Yep. And so it escalated and escalated to the point where by the end of my time in college, when I was a senior in college, I was watching porn every night for maybe an hour. Sometimes it would go longer than that. But I remember every night I would go into my room, close the door, lock the door, and then open up my laptop and dive into the world of online porn. Yeah. And just like many men, I didn't think there was any issue with it. I didn't think of it. It was just, oh, this is what most guys do. And it wasn't until I had a few incidents in my life where I started to notice the breaks in the glass, where I started to notice, oh, this porn habit is not just an isolated thing that I do at night. This is actually having consequences in my real life. And so one of the things that I noticed was the way that my lust was an actual problem that wasn't just something inside of me, but it was something that other people could see. And I remember this one incident where a friend of mine, we were standing outside of a classroom. We had just gotten out of the lecture. We were, talking outside this lecture hall. And we were talking about something, and he just paused and he said, dude, you've got a staring problem. And he pointed out to me the fact that I was checking out girls that were walking out of the classroom, and I was staring them up and down and objectifying them and lusting after them. Yep. And I thought I was doing it in a subtle way, like checking them out. But he pointed out, he said, dude, you've got a staring problem. People can see this. And that was the first break in the armor where I said, whoa, okay, this this is actually something that's impacting how I interact with other people. The second and more important turning point for me was this moment, again, towards the end of college. I had already graduated, but I stuck around in my university doing research for a year. And I remember this one very particular moment of walking down the street in this college town. It was UC Davis. And there were these two college-aged girls walking in front of me. And I remember just being consumed by this feeling of lust, of wanting to stare at their bodies, of wanting to just ogle and look and objectify and just stare. And that feeling of lust, of craving, of sexual craving, it just felt like this big emptiness opening up inside of me. And in that moment, I realized something so important, which is that the feeling of lust itself is a state of suffering. It's not a state of abundance and happiness and contentment and gratitude. It didn't matter. All the amazing things that were going on in my life meant nothing in that moment. The good grades, the friends I had, the lovers, anything, my physical health, the blue skies, I didn't pay attention to any of it. In that moment of lust, all I could see was what I don't have and how empty I felt because I didn't have it. So that was a really big turning point because it started to help me realize that, this lust that I've been training into my mind is actually causing me a lot of suffering because I'm constantly looking at what I don't have. And that's what got me, I had this existential crisis because I thought, I'll never be happy because I'm always going to be looking at what I don't have. And the other thing that was really powerful, I saw where that life was headed. I saw that if I don't make a change, I'm going to be some 70-year-old dude hitting on girls at college bars. Yep. And I saw that future for myself and I realized that's not the life I want. I don't want to be that creepy old dude who's still hitting on, college freshmen. Yep. And so I realized I needed to change something about my life or I was headed down a dark path.
What was that next step for you in that change process?
Yeah, so that moment it felt like an existential crisis. I remember that day very vividly, even though it was, so long ago, decades ago. But it was this moment where I really questioned everything in my life because I was a very high achieving young man. I was a stellar student, type A overachiever, setting the curve in all my classes, getting A pluses, all these things, captain of a sports team. I had a good life and I had a lot of things going for me, but I was unhappy on the inside. I was always wanting more and never satisfied. And so it got me interested in this question of what does it even mean to be happy? And will I ever be happy? Like, will I ever truly feel content and satisfied with what I have? And so that sent me down a path of searching. And I fortunately went to a bookstore and started looking at books on happiness and just this question. And turns out people were asking this question, had been asking it for millennia. And so there were modern scientists who were looking at this question, and that's the field of positive psychology. So I started reading books on positive psychology and looking at the science of the study of happiness and fulfillment. And through that exploration, I started learning about this term called mindfulness, started learning about meditation, and I ended up finding and reading this book that completely changed my life. And the book is called Happiness, and it's a book by a Tibetan monk named Mathieu Ricard. So he was this guy he's French, was born in France, grew up in the sciences just like me, and was working on his PhD in molecular biology at the Pasteur Institute. Ended up traveling to India and, finding about Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, and ended up becoming a Tibetan monk and has been a Tibetan monk ever since for the past 50 years. He's known as the happiest man alive because they've done these fMRI studies on him where they scan his brain, and they found out that his happiness brain waves are the highest that they've ever seen on any chart. But essentially, this book was so powerful because he blended kind of Western scientific rational approach with Eastern philosophy. So he took these two worlds and he said, okay, what if we look at, Buddhist philosophy from a rational, secular, scientific lens. And what he explored was this topic of what is happiness? Where does it actually come from? How do you actually cultivate it? And that book just totally blew my mind. I mean, it turned my life around 180 degrees because he showed very clearly and very logically. That was really important to me, that it was so logical. He just showed a lot of the things we do that we think are going to bring us happiness actually end up causing us suffering. And the things that actually do bring happiness are things that we don't get taught, but we can cultivate. So, for example, the mental quality of gratitude, gratefulness. Like, you can actually cultivate that mental quality and it directly leads to your happiness. Same with patience, same with compassion, same with equanimity, all these mental qualities that they talk about in Buddhist philosophy. It's like you can actually strengthen those. And the key underpinning was the understanding of neuroplasticity. And that was so important for me, understanding that what you do with your mind changes the structure and function of your brain. That there was a phrase in that book, it said, neurons that fire together, wire together. And I remember that so clearly because it showed me that every night that I logged onto a porn website, I was hardwiring in those neural pathways of lust and craving and objectification and dissatisfaction. And so that was the downside. But the upside is if I wanted more gratitude in my life, I could simply strengthen those neural pathways through meditation. So that was a huge turning point for me, understanding that.
No, that's incredible. There's a great quote from James Clear, his book, Atomic Habits. Everything, like the little things that you pay attention to the most determine what you value. So what are you paying attention to the most? What are you giving your attention to? You're putting a lot of value on that. And thus you're training your brain to appreciate that, to yearn for it, to crave it. I've noticed that too with myself, where I would stare, objectify women. And I noticed when I would go a day, 2 days, then a week, this hypersensitivity to sexual cues would rise up. And in Dr. Anna Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, I love the seesaw effect of pain and pleasure in the brain, where you're getting these extremely high dopaminergic kicks from pornography or in like cocaine and these high stimulating things. Even today with even fast food, it's highly stimulating. Video games. And then when you take that away for a brief moment, there's this come down effect, as you know, where the pain side starts to rise up and the pleasure starts to dip a little, and you start to get itchy. You start to get a little bit upset because you're not able to jump on the video game because you have to take your child somewhere or go to the grocery store to help your wife get something. And you're like, that's cutting into my video game time. That's cutting into this time. And you get irritable and you start to snap. The anger comes up. And then I've noticed, Jeremy, like if I stop doing something like playing video games, if I take a break, a week, 2 weeks later, I'll feel I don't need to play it. I feel more grounded, more, what would you say? Like I feel like I'm on this homeostasis plane and more peace. There's a lot more peace and space in my brain. It just feels like, and I think that's true. I think we don't really know what this stuff is doing until you take that moment to separate yourself. You take the day off of it and you're like, whoa, I'm just itching to get back on there. What's going on with me? Am I a slave to this thing? That's exactly what happened to me, where I decided, okay, I'm not going to watch porn today. Next thing you know, it's like I'm on my phone and I'm like, how did I get on my phone? Like, how did I get back here? I didn't even realize it's like unconscious. It's incredible how we're pulled, drawn in.
Yeah, totally subconsciously. Most people go back to it because it's just autopilot. It's part of their habitual patterning of their mind where it's not even an intentional action. There's just so much momentum because they've been doing it since, I mean, for most young men, we get into it 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And for most of us, it becomes kind of a daily or, maybe a couple times a week thing since we're that young. And so, it's almost like you said, you just don't even notice. And then you're right back there. And one other thing that you said that's so important is most people have no idea what their life is like without it because they've been doing it for so long. So many guys who say, well, what's the problem with porn? I watch it all the time and I don't notice anything. There's no consequences. And it's like, well, you don't even know what your life could be like because you've never gone without it. It's like asking a fish, how's the water? And they say, what water? Because they've been swimming in it their whole life. And so a lot of guys, they just don't know what they're leaving on the table in terms of their presence, their awareness, their vitality, their strength, their intimacy, all kinds of things. And it just takes stepping away from it for a while to start to notice.
Yep.
But it's uncomfortable. I mean, to normalize it, like you said, it's like stepping away from it. A lot of guys will think, well, okay, it's no problem. I could not watch it for 30 days. I'm not addicted. And then they try and they realize it's much harder than they thought.
Absolutely. I have a family member I was talking to yesterday, actually, and he was saying he's much into video games. Like it consumes most of his time outside of work. And he said to me, which I found very interesting, he said, when I'm at work, I'm itching to play a game, a certain game. And he would say, I come home and it feels like I don't want to play it anymore when I have the opportunity to play it. What is that? Because I get that too, which is so interesting. It's like, oh man, I can't wait. We put this image in our head of like this anticipation.
How good it's going to be.
How good it's going to be. But it's like when we do it, it's like, oh, that was it? What? Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm not in the mood anymore. It's like,
yeah, it's so fascinating. So one of the things that they know is true with addiction is that one of the signs of addiction is that you crave it more and more, even if your enjoyment of the actual thing stays the same or gets less. And so what will happen is you notice that it's something that you feel like you need, like I need this, even if I'm not necessarily enjoying the act of doing it. And that's one surefire sign of addiction is this feeling of I need to do it. I need it, but I don't even necessarily enjoy it, or it feels like a chore, like oh, I have to do it, or okay, let me get through this. And it's, there's a big difference between, a lot of people think of dopamine as this molecule of pleasure. Oh, it's the pleasure molecule, but it's not. It's the craving molecule. It's the molecule involved in wanting and craving. It's not necessarily the molecule involved in liking. It can be a lot of linkages because the things that are pleasurable that we like, our body tells us to crave it because we think, oh, okay, let's get more of that. But they can become separated. And that's what happens for a lot of addicts is the liking goes away, but there's still this strong sense of wanting and I need it. And that's the thirst. In Buddhist philosophy, a lot of Buddhism is really just talking about thirst or craving or, desire, this unhealthy kind of desire. And it's what it really boils down to, is that kind of craving for some experience.
I've noticed talking with young men about pornography. Do you see this too, Jeremy, where they will say, they will go on a streak. I don't really like that word, but I'll use it. They'll go a certain amount of days without pornography, and they'll have a bad day where they're sick, they're upset about something happens in the family, they're not, like I said, not feeling well, and then they'll watch it, and they'll come back to me and they'll say, like, what happened? And I notice these connections with men where they'll have a bad day and they're not feeling well, and then they'll relapse. And what's going on there?
Yeah. Well, that's what addiction is. Addiction is the attempt to escape pain.
Right.
That's what all addiction is running away from pain and finding ways to numb out, to escape, to avoid, to distract yourself away from some unpleasant emotion. And it doesn't have to be physical pain. Mostly it's emotional pain. And people don't realize when I say emotional pain, I mean, it can be stress or anxiety, but it can also be boredom. That's a huge trigger for a lot of guys. Like, oh, I'm bored. People don't realize boredom is a very unpleasant experience if you don't know how to work with it. And so most guys will think, oh, I'm bored. Oh, I don't like this feeling. Okay, let me escape this by playing video games, eating junk food, watching porn, doing something to escape that feeling. Yep. And there's a fascinating study that they did with rats where they essentially gave rats these water laced with some addictive drug like morphine, cocaine. They gave the rats this drug laced water, and they found that the rats would sit there and drink the water, press the buzzer to get the water, and they became addicted to it. They would sit there and essentially press the lever to get that drug water until they died because they were so addicted. And then they stopped putting the drug in the water, and eventually the rat learned, so it would stop pressing the buzzer because it learned that, okay, this is not giving me what I want. And so it learned to escape the addiction because it was no longer providing that reward. But then they did something really interesting. After the rat had learned, okay, the buzzer doesn't work anymore, I don't need to touch it, they then introduced some really stressful stimulus. Like they gave the rat a shock, like an unpleasant, painful shock. And the rat immediately ran back to the buzzer to try to press the lever and get the drug again. And so what that shows is that even when we feel like, oh, I'm free from this addiction, I'm not addicted anymore, like I'm doing well, I haven't watched in a long time. When that stress comes back in our life, we're like that rat that runs back to the buzzer to try to get that drug again. Even if we had learned, hey, this doesn't actually help me, it's not giving me what I want, we have this instinctual returning to it. And that's where learning about mindfulness and self-awareness is so critical for recovery, because it gives you the ability to notice that moment as it's happening, and the ability to choose differently. You could say, oh, I'm really stressed in this moment. I was just about to reach out for my laptop to look at porn. Is this what I want to do? Is this going to give me the happiness that it's promising me? Or is it going to lie to me like every single time it's done that for the last 10 years, where it promises me happiness and it leaves me feeling empty?
Yep. I've noticed in those times, I would visualize the outcome, what it's going to look and feel like afterwards. I imagine the guilt, I imagine the shame, I imagine kind of the pants around my ankles image, and seeing myself from a different perspective, like a fly on the wall. And I'm like, I don't want to look like that. I don't want to feel like that. But then there's also times when, yeah, you're in that moment and there's this unconscious pull. I've noticed when I'm aware, when you're talking about that mindfulness, when you're just sitting there and you notice that feeling, there's a moment where there's going to be an increase in discomfort and irritation and anger. And sometimes I would be sitting in my car and I've noticed that, and I'll put the phone down and I'll just like go like this with my head and like just have a moment of like kind of frustration, and then it would pass very quickly, and then I would be like, okay. And it's very quick. If you can get to that point where it comes up, it flows through you, and you can just let it go. Eckhart Tolle talks about that, and Michael Singer, great, talks about that. When you're in traffic, even simple things like someone cuts you off, you have a mantra in your head, relax, calm down, something, and then it'll flow through, and then it'll be quick rather than holding on to it, giving in, holding on to it just prolongs it, keeps the cycle running of irritation and the addiction cycle going. I find that to have worked for me. And it's so quick, like substituting, you talked about the existential concern that we all have of living in a world where suffering is inevitable. We just live in that world. And how to combat that is to add more suffering, but it towards the higher self. Go to the gym. It's tough. You get some exercise. You don't even have to go for a walk. Do something, and you combat that suffering with something else that's difficult. But that thing that's difficult then releases what you have going on inside of you, which Freud would call in an internal subpersonality that's at work, right? It's a living, breathing spirit that's pulling you, right? And you have to combat that with something else. And I think sitting in silence, going to a coffee shop, changing your environment help me with my addiction. Oh, I'm at home, everybody has gone out. Okay, perfect. That's my cue to watch porn. Okay, instead of during my recovery, I would go to the coffee shop, get out of the house when nobody's there, change the environment, change the pattern, do things that basically, essentially what I'm saying is just get outside of what you already know, get outside your comfort zone. That's it, right? And outside of what you already know is your best friend, your best bet, right? And I'd say find those habits. Any other habits that you would suggest, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, one really important thing for people to understand, as we talked about earlier, this addiction is this desire to escape unpleasant situations, unpleasant emotions, feelings. It's an inability to be with what's unpleasant without running away from it. So, boredom comes up, we run away. Loneliness comes up, we run away. Stress, run away. And so one of the ways to deal with that is to strengthen your ability to be with discomfort in any form without needing to run away from it. And this is the skill or the technique of equanimity. Equanimity is this mental quality that can be with what's unpleasant without needing to turn away from it or escape it. And it's a mental skill that you can train and you can strengthen. It's a muscle that you can strengthen by developing it. And so this is one of the types of meditation that you can do. So for people who aren't familiar with meditation, a lot of people think meditation is this woo-woo kind of fluffy stuff out there. It's magical, wishful thinking. Meditation is really just a way of training the mind. It's cultivating mental qualities that you want to strengthen. That's what meditation is. It's not anything magical. You don't have to have wishful thinking. It's just using our neurobiology and our physiology to understand that what you do with your mind strengthens those neural pathways. That's what meditation is. And so one of the meditations you can do is strengthening equanimity, which is so important for recovery, because then the next time an unpleasant emotion comes up, like boredom or loneliness or fear, or the unpleasant emotion of craving coming up and not acting on it, that's also an unpleasant feeling. When you have a strong craving for some kind of experience, for chocolate, for sex, not acting on that is unpleasant, right? Oh, I really want that donut. Oh, this is so unpleasant to sit and stare at that donut or smell that donut. And I just want to eat it. That's really unpleasant. And so if you have this quality that can say, oh, wow, this is an unpleasant experience. I don't need to escape this unpleasantness. I can be with, it's just unpleasant. Then you have your freedom, because you're not controlled by the conditions of chasing after what's pleasant and running away from what's unpleasant. So that is a superpower in our society today.
Absolutely. I coach people who suffer from panic attacks. And one of the key factors for overcoming panic attacks is how you communicate to yourself. Because one of the things I learned with myself is I started to view panic attacks as an opportunity rather than something that is going to kill me, that's going to make me suffer. And once I changed my mindset it was game over. I started to view opportunities as something. I started to talk to myself, Jeremy, every day like this. I hope I get a panic attack today because then I could prove myself wrong. I started to just shift everything. Why am I so scared of this? Like, am I going to live my life as a slave to this thing? And so once I did that, the panic attacks came less and less over time. It's entering the dragon's lair voluntarily, and it's confronting suffering voluntarily, forthrightly, upwards, not afraid of death, because panic attacks revolve around mortality and social judgment. Oh, what if people think I'm acting weird, and you know, and while I'm acting weird, I'm going to die in front of everybody. And so you're confronting two huge human conundrums, let's say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Two of the most powerful fears.
Yep.
Death
Exactly.
and social judgment.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that in, because it's so powerful. Changing the mindset of, instead of being afraid of these moments, and not just to embrace or accept them, but actually to be so grateful that they're arising, because it's an opportunity to free yourself or to strengthen what you need to strengthen. It's like, oh, like, for you working with panic attacks, but, for guys with porn addiction, it's like, oh, I'm so thankful I have an opportunity to work with lust. Like, and this is, where in like meditation training, a lot of times they teach you how to say, oh, my old friend, and then whatever the emotion is, like, oh, my old friend lust, welcome, come
Yes.
back in, come have tea with me, because it's an opportunity to heal your relationship with that experience. And that's so powerful if you can change your mindset to it, just like you said.
Yes, absolutely. Making friends with what you don't know. Studying, and also studying what's terrifying and what's lurking in the dark. Another thing, Jeremy, I wanted to bring up is I recently read an interesting book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts. And the Google engineers took the data from all these pornographic websites and what men search, specifically what men are into. And it's pretty obvious. It's obviously image. Men search images of women, videos, and it's more particularly around young women. But women, which is interesting, the most interesting part is what they search, and it's more literary. Women search descriptions of strong, muscular men in particular dominant fields of the competence hierarchy: billionaire, surgeon, werewolf, pirate. I can't remember the last one. Werewolf, surgeon, billionaire, vampire. Yeah, and it's really the Beauty and the Beast story with women. It's the sort of unintegrated, aggressive male that they hope to integrate successfully and to tame, right? And I was so fascinated by that, because it's true that women are attracted to the male who's up a certain competence hierarchy, but as well has an aggressive nature that can protect the woman in case of danger. But the woman has this urge and underlying biological need to hone in that aggression and make him civilized. And I thought about this in particular to men these days, where men would generalize with women and say, oh, all women are like this, all women are like that. And I think, well, it's not all women, it's you. And you should definitely get your act together and work on yourself. And maybe you'll become a lucky candidate to a woman, right? Then the man would say, well, why would I want to adhere to, the woman's needs? And I just want to do what I want to do. But it's like, first of all, you should be getting your act together for yourself. You should be getting physically fit. You should be practicing letting go, mindfulness, and living the Buddhist kind of lifestyle of not trying to grab onto all of the material world that surrounds us. And then later in my life, I noticed that the women would find me more competent because of the fact that I'm getting myself together. And then a beautiful, healthy relationship can evolve around that. I think you should focus on yourself, your higher self, and then that market, the dating market, could later come into your favor. Because men who watch pornography, they put women on a pedestal and they think, well, how am I going to get someone to go out with me? And I see it with men all the time. How am I going to get this? I'm just this guy, playing games and watching pornography. But I'm like, you have to make yourself into someone that you respect, that you feel is competent, that builds on your self-respect, right? I don't know. What do you think? It's such an interesting topic because we do want a companion.
I mean, you mentioned a lot of different topics there, so I wasn't sure if there was one you wanted me to go into. Just the one you touched on at the end there, like, one of the issues with porn is the way that it influences our views on what healthy relationships look like, our views on what healthy intimacy looks like, and it distorts it because it's a fantasy. I mean, the porn industry is an industry that is run with, financial objectives, and these companies are trying to make as much money as they can by hijacking your attention as much as they can. So they create these fantasies that are clickbaity and not realistic. And the unintended consequences of that is that it skews men's expectations of what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yes.
What my partner what she should look like. She should look like she's 18 years old for forever, right? And she should be into these kind of sexual acts that I'm seeing because I'm seeing them every night I log on to porn. So she should be into this because all the girls in the videos are looking like they're having a good time and they're orgasming. And so it screws with men. It also screws with women, because women are watching this too. And they're thinking, oh, is this how I'm supposed to behave? Is this what guys want from me? All the women I see aren't saying no or objecting. So I'm not allowed to say no or object. So there's a lot of ways, especially for the younger generation. I mean, this is one thing to talk about, people maybe our age who grew up kind of without porn a little bit and maybe got into it. But just imagine right now an 8-year-old boy finding Pornhub, and for the next 10 years of his life, he's watching hardcore internet porn and thinking that that's what healthy sex looks like. Yep. And the scary thing is his friend down the street, an 8-year-old girl, is also getting her hands on this and watching that and thinking, this is what adults do when they have sex. It's all about choking and slapping and anal and all the things that are common now. Yep. And so young boys and young girls are just getting imprinted that is what is healthy. And they're learning the wrong lessons.
Yep. It's terrifying to actually think about it. Because if I had my hands on a smartphone at that age, there's no question.
Natural curiosity. And this is what's important for people to understand. It's like, we're not demonizing sexuality. Sexuality is a beautiful, you were talking about this with, like healthy masculinity. Like, our sexuality is one of the most beautiful things about being a human. Yeah. But there is a kind of behavior that can be an unhealthy or unintegrated sexuality. Yep. That is not healthy. And so most people, they either go to one extreme or the other, cutting off sexuality completely, or saying we can't cut off anything. We need to just have it completely unhinged, and anything you want and anything that's fed to you is okay. But not realizing it's like healthy sexuality also needs boundaries of understanding, hey, this isn't healthy. That's not okay.
Yeah, because what I was getting at earlier with women being attracted to those, you know, those literary works is that men inevitably need to get all of these sub personalities integrated. Like if your addictions are out of control, you need to harness that in. You need to get that under control. You need to work on yourself and put that first. And I think, well, you have to in order for you to be at peace in some way.
Yeah.
When are you going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
find peace?
Yeah. Well, and you said a word earlier that, really resonated with me. You were talking about panic attacks, but it's the same for porn addiction. But it's like, I don't want to be a slave to this thing anymore.
Yeah.
And that, I remember when I was in my porn addiction, that phrase of mental slavery really, felt like it spoke to what I was going through. Like I was a slave to this aspect of uncontrolled lust. Like it would cause me to do things I didn't want to do. Like I would go to a cafe to sit and read my textbook, and I'd have these great intentions. I want to go and be focused, and this attractive girl would walk by, and I felt kind of controlled by the lust to look and objectify and stare. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to study. But I was a slave to that. And so, yeah, we've got to get these things under control so that they're not ruling us.
Yeah, and it also helped with my social anxiety too. I noticed when I would be anxious most of the time. I'd be intimidated by the beautiful woman behind the Starbucks counter, and I would stumble my words or stutter, and I would walk out of there with my head hanging low, saying, "Oh, I embarrassed myself, what a fool." But I had this mentality at the time, Jeremy, of, well, you got to come back here tomorrow to the same place and try it again. And I was like, oh God, really? And I knew that had to be done. It's like we were talking about earlier, confronting that thing that you're trying to run away from. And so I came back and I got a little bit better the next time. And the more I was doing that, the more I became comfortable with the failure, but as well as with what works when I talk to that person. Oh, say that, don't say that, Oh, I stumbled there. Just be aware next time. Plan out what you want to say. Develop a persona. Develop, your social skills. And it got better as time went on. And with the absence of pornography, yes, like you were saying, I stopped idolizing the woman, objectifying them, but I started to ground myself and see other people for who they are, for their personality, for their just who they are. And that improved. It really did. Because with pornography, I was I felt like I was in isolation. Felt like these images in these videos, not only did they have control over me, but I was hooked into what you were saying sex should be and what it is. And now I have a wife, and she's not dolled up all the time. She wakes up, in her pajamas. You see people for who they are. It's the Peter Pan story of, well, Wendy is the real woman, and Peter Pan doesn't want the real woman. He wants to idolize and entertain Tinkerbell, who's the figment of his imagination, who's provocative, wearing that tight green outfit. And so he doesn't want the real thing. It's too intimidating. And so he wants to remain king of Neverland, living in his fantasy world. And I had that image in my head, and I didn't want that at all. And so now you have your coaching website at unhookedacademy.com, where you coach all these young boys and not just young boys, but all men of all age you coach and who are struggling with this. And so, how's that been for you?
I mean, it's fantastic. It feels like a very meaningful thing, for myself, knowing what it feels like to be stuck in that addiction, knowing how isolating it feels, how lonely it feels, how hopeless it can feel when you're struggling with that addiction, how much shame you might feel thinking you're the only one. So I know just how painful it is. And so getting to support people and show them, hey, there's a pathway out of this darkness. You don't have to suffer in this. There are things you can do that will build you a ladder so you can get out of that hole. Yeah, it's very meaningful work, and I love seeing the transformations that the guys go through. Even just showing up to one of the calls when they realize, maybe for the first time, that they're not alone. It's like, oh, I'm not the only one who struggles with this. Oh, okay, I'm not, some uniquely broken person. Like, this is normal to get hooked by these things.
And when you sign up on your website, there are weekly calls?
Twice a week we've got, because we have guys from all over the world, so guys in different time zones. So we have a couple calls a week that people can just drop in on, if they need support. Even if they don't need support, a lot of guys just show up as part of their recovery just to listen to what other guys are going through or support other. So it's really helpful to just have a community. I think just having a community of other guys who get it, who know what you're going through, and who aren't there to judge you, that alone is half the healing. Just kind of being in that community where it's like, we're here because we've all struggled with porn. We get what that's like. There's a sense of, there's no judgment. It's like we all get it, and we're not there to judge. We're just there to support each other. That is so powerful.
That's amazing. And I've viewed your YouTube channel, and I think your videos are helpful. Like, they're as helpful as they can be, man, because I think we live in an age where people are, young men, well, not just young, they are more interested in this because it's so novel. Pornography for them became the norm. And then now the novelty is not watching pornography. And now that audience is going up and up because of the no fat movement. I know some of my no fat videos, one of them has like 300,000 plus views on it. And I didn't expect that because my channel's all about anxiety recovery. And I just wanted to share my no-fap journey along the way. And the videos about no-fap are like, wow, like, where are those numbers coming from? And so I found that to be particularly interesting, that men are curious about this. And your channel's fantastic because you're covering all the details, the steps to recover. And not only that, but interviewing and talking with men who are battling with it. So the relatability on your end is just as good as it gets.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, the purpose of starting the podcast and the channel was just to help people find a way out of it, and say, hey, it doesn't have to be hard, because a lot of guys just make the mistake of just trying to stop. There's no plan. There's no underlying structure or philosophy or anything. It's just, oh, okay, I got to stop this. I'm going to stop. I'm going to use my willpower and stop. And it just doesn't work. And it's helpful to understand habit science, understand the mind, understand some helpful things when it comes to letting go of bad habits and building new ones. So try to keep it pragmatic and practical and useful on the channel. And
what you do is fantastic. And I think that'll be a great place to stop, Jeremy. So I really appreciate you being here, and my audience will appreciate you being here as well. You're full of, I could keep talking to you for another hour, but you have to go to bed at some point. So I really appreciate you, and I thank you for taking the time to meet.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity, and really a pleasure to be here. And thanks for talking about this topic, because it's it's an uncomfortable one. It's a sensitive topic in our society. Nobody really likes to talk about sex and masturbation and porn. So appreciate you having the courage to talk about it.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening to today's episode. Make sure to go to unpluganxiety.com and check out my anxiety recovery program. Everything that worked for me, I include in this program, including a releasing trauma exercise, meditations, a journal where you can plan and face the fears that you're not realizing that are hidden within the unconscious mind. Everything that you do in this program is unraveling all of the underlying fears and limiting beliefs that are holding you back from reaching your truer self. Go check that out. What are you waiting for?